All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be installing the Gauntlet high pressure fuel pump from Precision Raceworks. This is their new high pressure fuel pump upgrade that's completely different from all the other ones that we've seen on the market up until now. So as you probably expect, it installs very differently as well. So I'll walk you guys through the entire process of how to get this installed on your car so that you know how to do this at home. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So to start off, we're basically going to do the same as every other DIY. We've got to remove everything so that we have access to the engine. So we're going to remove all of the trays and stuff that are covering the shroud, as well as the strut bar. It's a bunch of 10mm screws, as well as the E18 and 16mm bolts that hold the strut bar in place. If you guys need guidance on how to do that, I'll have another DIY linked in the video description that'll walk you through those steps. But because that's the same process for pretty much every DIY on these cars, we're just going to skip forward so this video isn't longer than it needs to be. I've also removed the hoses going to my Ross Racing catch can, which we'll talk more about my new PCV setup in a future video, but you really need access to your high pressure fuel pump and all the injectors. So anything that you have mounted on top of here, remove it, and then it's game time. Hey you, don't be a silly goose. This job requires disconnecting electrical connectors, so that means that it's a good idea to disconnect the negative terminal on your battery. This will make sure that you minimize the chance of causing electrical issues while you're in the process of doing this DIY. So pop open your trunk, open up the battery access panel, and grab a 10mm socket to loosen the negative terminal on your battery. I also highly recommend putting a microfiber towel on top of the battery so that you don't inadvertently complete the circuit while you're in the middle of the job. And it's a good idea to put a microfiber towel through the trunk latch so that you can avoid closing the trunk by mistake. Alright, now let's go ahead and get back to the DIY. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove the hardline. So as you can see here, I've got the TU pump, but this process will be the same even for the stock high pressure fuel pump. Basically each of these nuts just need to be backed off, but some fuel will come out. So you want to make sure you have some shop rags or something underneath each of these connections. You can see I've also got them up here where the hard line connects to the fuel rail. So just put, a microfiber towel or something to catch the fuel that's going to leak. And this is also why you want to make sure you don't leave the battery connected, because if at any point the low pressure fuel pump inadvertently tries to prime your fuel system, fuel is going to shoot out of here and it's going to make a bigger mess than we're already going to make. So go ahead and grab a 17mm wrench and slowly back off on each of these lines. Just crack it loose and slowly turn until you start seeing fuel drip out. And you can even give it a little bit of a wiggle as it loosens up. Looks like this one's mostly dry. There we go. Starting to leak out a little bit. I actually undid my battery last night, so it's been sitting all night to let all the fuel pressure minimize, so that makes this a lot less messy than it would be. Now on this line, you're not going to be able to move it very much because the hard line does connect to the fuel rail, so we're also going to remove the nuts on the fuel rail, or just kind of loosen them, and as you loosen them, usually some fuel begins backing out. There it goes. So yeah, it kind of lets some air come in on the back end so that fuel can actually release. So just let it drain a little bit, slowly back the nuts off. You won't need to remove it all the way yet. We'll remove it as we're taking the high pressure fuel pump off, but this will just relieve all the fuel pressure and let the fuel get soaked up on these towels. Also, if you need a little more room, feel free to remove these coil packs. I've done this so many times I'm able to do it without it, but this is just an E8 E-Torx on each of these coil packs, so you can undo that, pull the coil pack out, and then you'll have more room to access these nuts and everything. And of course, we're also going to unplug
the high pressure fuel pump. So this electrical connector is the same as all the others on the car. You pop out the little gray tab, pop that out, then squeeze it, push it in, and pull. Then squeeze it and pull. This is always easier in the movies. Squeeze and pull. See, exactly. I just did that on the first try. It was super easy, don't mind me. But seriously, sometimes it gets caught on here, so it helps to squeeze it and then push it in to help the clip fully release, and then pull everything out all at once. So if it feels like it's sticking, you can try that. Just squeeze the tab, push the whole connector in, then slide it out, or you can use a small pick tool on the back to try to pry up this little piece that's actually catching on the clip. Now I've gone ahead and moved the low pressure feed line out of the way and moved my little shop towel a little bit out of the way so I can actually access the bolts for the high pressure fuel pump. The most important thing here is to not do more than a quarter turn or half turn as you go side to side. So don't loosen one side all the way and then loosen the other side. You basically need to go back and forth between the bolts as you're loosening it to make sure that the whole high pressure fuel pump is lifting up as flat as possible and you're not putting a side load on the high pressure fuel pump piston. So what I like to do is start on one side and do a quarter turn. Then on the other side, I do a quarter turn and another quarter turn. Then I come back over here, 2 quarter turns, and then back here, get it lined up, and 2 quarter turns. And then basically just do that back and forth, and the high pressure fuel pump will begin to lift up until you've got it completely lifted up off the valve cover. Now, once you've got it fully loosened, you can see the high pressure fuel pump isn't being held down by the screws anymore. You can just finish backing them all the way off on each side. And then at this point, the hard line will also be a lot more loose, so you'll be able to easily unscrew this from the fuel pump and from the fuel rail so that you can remove the hard line. I just like to do this after the high pressure fuel pump is already, removed and loose, because when everything's tightened down, this is all super tight and it's almost impossible to remove the fuel rail or the hard line while it's attached to the fuel pump and everything's tightened down. And then the high pressure fuel pump will just lift straight up and we've got that removed. Now at this point, it's a good idea to do a quick inspection. So you're gonna look in here at the cam follower, make sure there's no damage or anything. I don't think I've ever seen anybody have actual issues with the cam follower, so I would expect that to be good. Also look at the gasket itself. If there's any damage or if it looks super smashed down, then you should replace this as well. I've reused this in the past without any issues, so most people can get away with it. But if you do want to replace it, it is a good idea. I'll have the part number in the video description as well. So here it is, everything that we're going to be installing today. So we've got the new Gauntlet high pressure fuel pump, as well as a replacement hard line and a low pressure feed line. Then we've also got the adapters, wiring, extensions, basically all the tools and stuff that we need to make this as plug and play as possible. So let's go ahead and get all this installed. So the first thing that we need to do is install this mounting bracket. Now it installs this way. You can see it has like a pretty deep recess for these holes on the side. On the other side, it's a lot more shallow. So this is the side that you want facing down, so that way you can install the bolts and have them completely flush. So we'll put this right here and kind of line it up. And then we also have an alignment tool that will make sure that this is completely centered in the hole. So take the alignment tool out and pop that in the middle, and that will make sure that it's centered where it needs to be and it won't move. Then we're going to take the bolts that actually bolted onto the cylinder head. This is what they look like. They're the longer, thinner bolts in the kit. The other thicker bolts won't fit in the holes anyway, so you'll know that those aren't the right ones. But go ahead and drop these into these holes on each side, and you can kind of just start hand tightening them first to make sure they thread in smoothly. Let's see. Beautiful. And then these screws have a 5mm Allen head, so just use that and tighten it down. And there is a torque spec. I'll put the torque spec at the bottom of the screen here. Keep in mind that even though these are going into the same bolts as the stock high pressure fuel pump, you don't need to worry about going side to side because we're not bolting down the fuel pump here. This is just the mounting bracket, so you can torque down each side individually. Now the next thing we're going to do is install the actual high pressure fuel pump. So that's going to go right into this hole. So take off the bottom cover to expose the piston assembly, and then we'll just slide it right in. Now don't forget, because this is going to be metal on metal, you want to take a little bit of oil and kind of run it around this part of the assembly so that way it's protected and it won't have like complete metal on metal contact. And then we'll go ahead and slide it in right here. There we go. And just kind of line up the holes. And now we're going to take those two bigger screws and hand thread those in to hold the fuel pump onto the mounting bracket. We'll just hand tighten it first until it's snug. Now next we're going to install the Hardline, and so this comes with a brand new Hardline. You don't need to bend the stock one or anything like that. So just take off these protected caps. Keep in mind, most of the issues that people have with direct injection systems is due to contamination. So all of this is to keep it as clean as possible. So do your due diligence when you take these covers off. Install them as quickly as possible. Don't just leave them hanging out, because that gives you a better chance of, introducing dirt or something. And I like to do this before the pump is fully seated, just because it's a little bit easier to get stuff off and on while the pump is loose. So I'm gonna hand thread everything, and that way we have the best opportunity to get it all lined up, and then we'll tighten down all the screws. So take off that cap, and then just line up all three of the holes, and then we'll just hand tighten each of the connections. Just kind of get it started on each point, but don't fully tighten it down yet. And when you thread it on, it should go on smoothly. So if it feels tight, back it off and try to tighten it again. And if you need to, you can always, remove the coil packs to get a little more room for your fingers. And then now at this point, we can finally start tightening down the high pressure fuel pump. Now again, you're gonna do a quarter turn on each side at a time so that you can tighten down the fuel pump straight down and flat without putting any sort of side load on the piston. And then you'll go ahead and torque it to spec. I'll go ahead and put the torque spec here. The kit also comes with a wiring harness extension, so we're going to go ahead and install this onto the wiring so we don't actually have to cut or splice anything. So the factory plug plugs in like this or like this. There we go. And then it extends to here and plugs into the high pressure fuel pump. There we go. Just kind of keep the wiring tucked under like that. And then the last thing that we're going to need, of course, is the low pressure feed line. Here we go, this long line. So this piece screws into the high pressure fuel pump, and then this piece connects to the factory fuel line. So it's going to actually replace this metal hard line that went to the stock or your TU high pressure fuel pump. So starting with this end, we'll go ahead and screw it into the back of the high pressure fuel pump. So we'll remove this cap off of your high pressure fuel pump. Now, one thing that can help just to give you a little more space is I removed this post. This is one of the posts where you would mount your engine cover, and it screws into this right here. So as you can see, there's not really a lot of space, but when it's screwed in here, you can use a 13 millimeter wrench to unscrew it and remove it.
And then that'll give you a little more space under here for the low pressure feed line. So we'll go ahead and install this low pressure feed line. It'll go underneath the plug connector. And it's kind of a blind install, so just take your time. And here's a final look at the routing just for reference. So the low pressure feed line goes underneath the connector, and then I've got it going under the coil pack and then across the valve cover, just like the stock fuel line. Again, this space is very tight, so if you use an 11/16 box wrench and kind of come in at an angle, you should be able to tighten this down. And then we're gonna squeeze our hands back here, and this is the stock low pressure line. So pull this black part back. Actually, we'll put a little rag under here in case more fuel comes out. So you're gonna pull this black piece, get all this out of the way, pull this black piece back, and then it should release the hard line. And then the nostrum line will plug right in. We're actually gonna tuck this under here. Now, because of how the fuel line routes around this coil pack, there is this little sleeve, and this will just help fight any sort of abrasions or anything like rubbing that could come from the fuel line being basically touching the coil pack right here. So what we're going to do is just wrap the sleeve around the fuel line in this area. Actually, I'll disconnect this connector just to give us a little more room. And then the kit comes with these little clamps, so you can slide this over the line and then pinch this together. And as you squeeze it down, it'll clamp the sleeve onto the fuel line so it won't move. So wrap it around and then squeeze. All right, so here we've got it wrapped around on both ends. And then just give it a really hard squeeze. And that should hold it in place. And then of course, don't forget to tighten down these nuts that are holding on the hard line to the fuel rail as well as the high pressure fuel pump. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten those down, and I'll put the torque spec down here at the bottom of the screen so you can make sure that you're not gonna have any fuel leaks. And then once you finish that, basically you're all done. Everything else is just the reverse of the removal. Put all of your trim back on and you've completed the job.
And that wraps it all up. So like any job with your fuel system, you'll want to take things a little slowly when you're starting up. The fuel system's mostly empty, so that first start might take a little bit for the car to actually turn over, but you really want to double check and make sure there aren't any fuel leaks. So first of all, go ahead and flash your tune. Make sure that you've got the right map selected, and in your custom tune, make sure you have the settings that are dialed in for your high pressure fuel pump upgrade. Then I recommend double checking everything in the engine bay. When you're doing the flashing process and opening the door and stuff, it should be priming your fuel system. You'll hear the fuel pump turn on. So at that point, you should be able to double check and make sure that there aren't any leaks. If that works well, then go ahead and start the car. And again, just look through your work again to make sure there aren't any leaks at any of the connections, especially where the fuel lines are connected or where the hard lines are screwed together. You know, just make sure that there aren't any leaks at any of the connections. And if all is well, then go ahead, go for a test drive, start running some logs, and you should be good to go from there. So I'm really excited to test this out. Stay tuned. I will be posting dyno data, draggy data, all of that good stuff as I get this tested on my 340i with the upgraded Dynamic AutoWorks Turbo. So more coming soon there, but for now, that's how you get it all installed. So I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.